Hello, welcome to the channel. If you're a fan of scary creatures and chilling stories, subscribe to the channel to support us and follow the stories. Also, leave a comment telling me where you're watching this video from. All because Alex Matthews stepped out of his shiny red Jeep, inhaling deeply as the crisp Minnesota air filled his lungs. The parking lot at the Superior National Forest trailhead was nearly empty, save for a weathered pickup truck that had seen better days. He smiled, pleased with himself for choosing a less popular trail for his first solo camping adventure. Nothing like getting away from it all, Alex muttered to himself, hoisting his brand-new backpack onto his shoulders. The weight of it made him stumble slightly, but he quickly regained his balance, glancing around to ensure no one had witnessed his momentary clumsiness. As he approached the trailhead, a gruff voice called out, "Hold up there, city boy." Alex turned to see an older man emerge from a small ranger station he hadn't noticed before. The man's weathered face was partially hidden beneath a bushy gray beard, and his ranger uniform looked as if it had been through several harsh winters. "Planning on hitting the trail?" the ranger asked, eyeing Alex's pristine gear skeptically. "Yes, sir," Alex replied with a grin. "Heading out for a 3-day trek. Got it all planned out on my GPS." He proudly held up his high-end smartphone. The ranger's bushy eyebrows furrowed. "Listen here, son. These woods ain't no place to be relying on fancy gadgets. You got a map and compass?" Alex's smile faltered slightly. "Well, no, but I've got my phone and a portable charger. I'll be fine." The ranger shook his head, his expression a mixture of concern and exasperation. "Technology's a fickle friend out here, boy. The forest has a way of playing tricks on the unprepared. You'd best—" "I appreciate the concern," Alex interrupted, his earlier enthusiasm dampened by the ranger's warnings. "But I've done my research. I'll be fine." Before the ranger could protest further, Alex turned and strode confidently onto the trail, the chirping of his GPS app guiding his way. For the first few hours, the hike was everything Alex had hoped it would be. The dense canopy of pine and spruce trees filtered the sunlight, creating a mystical atmosphere. He stopped occasionally to snap photos with his phone, already composing the perfect Instagram captions in his mind. As afternoon turned to evening, however, Alex's confidence began to waver. The trail had become less distinct, and he found himself checking his GPS more frequently. The device showed him moving steadily along his planned route, but something felt off. "This can't be right," Alex muttered, squinting at his phone screen. According to the GPS, he should be approaching a small lake, but all he could see were trees stretching endlessly in every direction. A cool breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it a faint, eerie whisper that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. He shook his head, trying to dispel the growing sense of unease. "Get it together, Matthews," he chided himself. "You're just tired. Set up camp and everything will look better in the morning." As he began to unpack his tent, the last rays of sunlight disappeared, plunging the forest into an inky darkness that his small headlamp struggled to penetrate. The shadows seemed to dance at the edge of the light, and more than once, Alex whirled around, certain he'd seen movement in his peripheral vision. With the tent finally erected, Alex crawled inside, zipping the entrance closed with a sense of relief. He pulled out his phone once more, frowning at the weak signal. "Just need to check my position one more time," he said aloud, trying to calm his frayed nerves with the sound of his own voice. As the GPS app loaded, Alex's eyes widened in disbelief. According to the screen, he was in the middle of a large lake. "That's impossible," he whispered, his heart beginning to race. He crawled out of the tent, shining his headlamp in a wide arc. Nothing but trees greeted him, their branches seeming to reach for him like gnarled fingers. Panic began to set in as Alex spun in circles, desperately seeking any sign of the trail he'd been following. But every direction looked the same, an impenetrable wall of vegetation that couldn't possibly conceal a body of water large enough to match his GPS reading. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Is anyone out there? I think I'm lost." The forest seemed to absorb his cries. the oppressive silence broken only by the pounding of his own heart. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, came a reply that turned his blood to ice. A long, mournful howl echoed through the trees, closer than any wolf should have been. It was answered by another, then another, the sounds seeming to come from all around him. Alex dove back into his tent, hands shaking as he fumbled with the zipper. His fingers scrambled for his phone, desperate to call for help. But as the screen lit up, his last hope crumbled. No signal. As the howls grew closer, Alex huddled in his tent, the ranger's words echoing in his mind. "Technology's a fickle friend out here, boy. The forest has a way of playing tricks on the unprepared." He squeezed his eyes shut, willing it all to be a bad dream. But the nightmare was only beginning, and somewhere in the darkness, something was coming for him. The first light of dawn filtered through the dense canopy, casting eerie shadows across Alex's campsite. He hadn't slept a wink, the night filled with strange noises and an overwhelming sense of being watched. As he unzipped his tent with trembling hands, Alex's eyes darted nervously around the clearing. "Okay, Matthews, get it together," he muttered to himself. "Just retrace your steps. You couldn't have gone that far off trail." Alex packed up his gear as quickly as his shaking fingers would allow. He pulled out his phone, hoping against hope that the GPS malfunction had been a temporary glitch. The screen flickered to life, still showing him squarely in the middle of a non-existent lake. "Come on," he growled, resisting the urge to hurl the device into the underbrush. Taking a deep breath, Alex closed his eyes and tried to recall the direction he'd been traveling the day before. "Sun rises in the east, so if I came from that way," he pointed, "then the trail should be this way." With a determined set to his jaw, Alex shouldered his pack and set off. But as the hours wore on, his confidence wavered. The trees all looked the same, and more than once he was certain he passed landmarks he'd seen before. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon once more, panic clawed at Alex's throat. He was no closer to finding the trail, and the thought of spending another night in the open made his skin crawl. Just as he was about to give in to despair, Alex caught a glimpse of something through the trees, a structure of some kind. Hope surged through him as he quickened his pace, pushing through the undergrowth. He burst into a small clearing and stopped short. Before him stood a cabin, its wooden walls weathered and gray with age. It looked as if it had been abandoned for years, with vines creeping up the sides and a layer of moss coating the roof. Alex approached cautiously, eyeing the structure for any signs of recent habitation. As he reached the porch, his gaze fell on the door, and his breath caught in his throat. 3 long, deep gashes marred the wood, as if some massive beast had tried to claw its way inside. "What the hell?" Alex whispered, his hand hovering over the marks. They looked fresh, the wood pale where it had been stripped bare. Gathering his courage, he grasped the doorknob and turned. To his surprise, it opened with a protesting creak. Alex poked his head inside, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Silence was his only answer. Stepping fully into the cabin, Alex fumbled for his flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a Spartan interior. A small table with 2 chairs, a pot-bellied stove in one corner, and a narrow bed against the far wall. A thick layer of dust covered everything, but as Alex moved further into the room, his light fell on something out of place. On the table lay a leather-bound journal, its cover free of the dust that coated the surface around it. "That's odd," Alex murmured, reaching for the book. As he flipped it open, a slip of paper fluttered to the floor. He bent to retrieve it, recognizing it as a torn page from a map. Scrawled across it in jagged handwriting were the words, "The lake is a lie." A chill ran down Alex's spine as he turned his attention to the journal itself. Page after page was filled with increasingly frantic entries, all describing similar experiences to his own. GPS devices showing impossible locations, compasses spinning wildly, and an ever-present sense of being lost and watched. The final entry caught Alex's eye. May 15th, I think. The forest is alive. It hungers. The technology draws it, feeds it somehow. I can hear it whispering in the trees, calling me deeper. God help me, I think I'm going to answer. This is insane, Alex said, shaking his head. It has to be some kind of joke, right? As if in answer, a floorboard creaked behind him. Alex whirled around, his flashlight beam dancing wildly across the walls. For a moment he could have sworn he saw a figure reflected in the cabin's grimy window, pale, gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. But when he blinked, it was gone. Just your imagination, Alex told himself, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. You're tired, that's all. Just need some rest. Despite his misgivings, Alex knew he couldn't face another night in the open. He secured the door as best he could, pushing one of the heavy chairs against it for good measure. As he settled onto the narrow bed, fully clothed and with his backpack clutched to his chest, Alex's gaze kept drifting back to the journal on the table. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and filled with nightmares. Alex found himself drowning in an endless, dark lake, unseen things brushing against his legs as he struggled to reach the surface. Just as his lungs were about to burst, he jerked awake with a gasp. Moonlight filtered through the cabin's dirty windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Alex lay still, his heart pounding, straining to hear anything beyond the creaking of the old building settling. Then he heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from the door. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he watched, paralyzed as the deep claw marks on the wood seemed to widen and deepen before his very eyes. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the cabin, and Alex bit back a scream. Whatever was out there, it knew he was inside, and it was trying to get in. As the scratching intensified, Alex's mind raced. The journal entries, the GPS malfunction, the strange symbols. None of it made sense, and yet he couldn't deny the terror that gripped him. This isn't real, he whispered desperately. It can't be real. But as the door began to splinter under the assault of whatever monstrous thing lurked in the forest, Alex Matthews realized that he had stumbled into a nightmare far more real and dangerous than he could have ever imagined, and morning was still a long, terrifying way off. The first rays of dawn crept through the cabin's grimy windows, rousing Alex from a fitful sleep. He jolted upright, memories of the night's terrors flooding back. His eyes darted to the door, dreading what he might find. To his shock, the door stood intact. The chair he'd pushed against it remained in place, undisturbed. The deep claw marks that had seemed to widen during the night were gone, leaving only the original scratches he'd first observed. What the hell is going on? Alex muttered, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. He approached the door cautiously, half expecting some monster to burst through at any moment. But when he opened it, he found only the peaceful forest clearing, bathed in morning light. Alex stepped out onto the porch, his brow furrowed in confusion. Was it all just a dream? As if in answer, a cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it a whisper that made Alex's blood run cold. Not a dream. Never a dream. He spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but found himself alone. Shaking his head, Alex decided it was time to leave this unsettling place behind. Okay, Matthews, he said to himself. New day, new start. Find the trail, get the hell out of here. Alex gathered his belongings, pausing only briefly to consider taking the mysterious journal. In the end, he left it behind, too unsettled by its contents to want it near him. As he stepped off the porch, Alex glanced back one last time at the cabin. For a split second, he could have sworn he saw a pale face watching him from one of the windows. But when he blinked, it was gone. Alex set off into the forest, determined to find his way back to civilization. He tried to orient himself using the sun, but the dense canopy made it difficult to get a clear bearing. After what felt like hours of walking, a flicker of hope ignited in his chest as he heard voices ahead. Hello? He called out, quickening his pace. Can anyone hear me? I need help. Alex burst through a thicket into a small clearing, relief washing over him at the sight of a group of hikers. There were 5 of them, gathered around a map spread on a fallen log. "Oh, thank God," Alex said, approaching the group. "I've been lost out here for days. Can you help me find the way back to the trailhead?" The hikers continued their discussion, seemingly oblivious to Alex's presence. "Excuse me?" Alex said, louder this time. He reached out to tap one of the hikers on the shoulder, but his hand passed right through as if the man were made of mist. Alex stumbled back, his mind reeling. What are you?" One of the hikers, a young woman with a red backpack, looked up from the map. For a moment, Alex thought she was looking right at him, but her gaze seemed to pass through him. "Did you guys hear something?" she asked her companions. An older man in the group shrugged. "Probably just the wind. This forest can play tricks on you if you let it." "Yeah," the woman replied, though she didn't look convinced. "Let's get moving. I don't like the feel of this place." Alex watched in stunned silence as the group packed up and continued down a path he hadn't noticed before. Without thinking, he followed them, desperate not to be left alone again. As he trailed behind the hikers, Alex's mind raced. Were they ghosts? Was he the ghost? Nothing made sense anymore. The group led him to a stream, where they stopped to refill their water bottles. Alex, parched from his ordeal, reached out to scoop up some water. To his horror, his hand passed right through the surface, leaving it undisturbed. "This can't be happening," he whispered, staring at his hands in disbelief. Suddenly, a shrill ringing cut through the air. Alex jumped, realizing it was coming from his pocket. With trembling hands, he pulled out his phone, which he'd thought long dead. The screen showed an unknown number. Against his better judgment, Alex answered. "Hello?" At first, there was only static. Then, faintly, he heard what sounded like distant screams and pleas for help, growing louder and more numerous until they became a cacophony of terror. Alex flung the phone away, but the screaming continued, seeming to come from the very air around him. The hikers, still unaware of his presence, looked up in alarm. "Do you hear that?" one of them asked, fear evident in his voice. Before anyone could respond, a thick, unnatural mist began rolling in, quickly enveloping the group. Alex watched in horror as the hikers began to fade, their forms becoming translucent. "Help us!" the woman with the red backpack cried out, her voice echoing as if from a great distance. "We're lost, And then they were gone, leaving Alex alone once more in the suddenly silent forest. He stood there, shaking, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. The implications were terrifying. How many others had the forest claimed? Was he doomed to the same fate? As if in response to his thoughts, he noticed strange symbols beginning to appear on the trees around him. They glowed with an eerie blue light, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Alex approached one of the marked trees, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't explain. As he reached out to touch the glowing symbol, he heard a gravelly voice behind him. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, boy." Alex whirled around to find himself face to face with an old man he hadn't heard approach. The man's weathered face was partially hidden beneath a wild gray beard, and his eyes held a wisdom that seemed ancient and otherworldly. "Who are you?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's happening to me?" The old man smiled, but it was a sad expression, tinged with something that might have been pity. "The forest has taken an interest in you, it seems," he said cryptically. "The question is, are you strong enough to resist its hunger?" As Alex struggled to form a response, the old man reached into his tattered coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "If you wish to survive, to understand, follow this map," he said, holding it out to Alex. "But be warned, the path it shows is treacherous, and the knowledge you seek may be more terrible than you can imagine." Alex hesitated for a moment before taking the map with a shaking hand. When he looked up again, the old man was gone, as if he'd never been there at all. Left alone once more, Alex unfolded the map, his eyes widening as he took in its contents. It was unlike any map he'd ever seen, filled with strange symbols and winding paths that seemed to defy the laws of physics. As he studied it, Alex realized he was at a crossroads. He could try to find his way back, to cling to the rational world he knew. Or he could follow this bizarre map into the heart of the forest's mystery, risking everything in the process. With a deep breath, Alex made his choice. Whatever forces were at work in this forest, whatever had happened to those hikers and possibly countless others, he was determined to uncover the truth. As he set off in the direction indicated by the map, the forest seemed to close in around him, branches reaching out like grasping fingers. But Alex pressed on, driven by a mixture of fear and an insatiable need to understand. Little did he know, his journey into the heart of the forest's dark secret was only just beginning. Alex trudged through the increasingly dense forest, his eyes darting between the cryptic map and his surroundings. The symbols on the parchment seemed to shift and change whenever he wasn't looking directly at them, adding to his growing sense of disorientation. As he pushed through a particularly thick patch of undergrowth, Alex stumbled into a small clearing. His breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight before him. Every tree surrounding the clearing bore the same glowing blue symbols he'd seen earlier, pulsing in an eerie, synchronized rhythm. "What is this place?" Alex whispered, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness of the clearing. As if in response, a gravelly chuckle emanated from the shadows. "This, my boy, is where the veil grows thin." Alex spun around to see the old man from before emerging from between two symbol-laden trees. In the pulsing blue light, the hermit's eyes seemed to glow with an inner fire. "You again?" Alex said, relief and wariness warring in his voice. "Who are you? What's happening to me?" The old man's mouth twisted into a wry smile. "Names have power here, boy. Best not to bandy them about carelessly." He gestured to the glowing symbols. "As for what's happening, well, that's a matter of perspective, isn't it?" Alex felt his frustration building. "Look, I'm lost. I'm seeing impossible things, and I'm pretty sure I'm going insane. I need answers, not riddles." The hermit's expression grew serious. "The forest hungers, boy. It feeds on the lost, the confused, the desperate. Your technology, your reliance on it, that's what drew you in. But it's your fear that's keeping you here." "My fear?" Alex asked, confusion evident on his face. The old man nodded sagely. "Fear clouds the mind, distorts reality. The forest feeds on that distortion, growing stronger with each lost soul it traps." Alex's mind raced, trying to process this information. But why me? Why now? The hermit's eyes took on a distant look. "The barriers between worlds are weakening. Climate change, electromagnetic pollution, the constant barrage of signals we pump into the air, it's all taking its toll. The old spirits are stirring, and this forest, it's just the beginning." A chill ran down Alex's spine at these words. He opened his mouth to ask another question, but the old man held up a gnarled hand to silence him. "Listen closely, boy. The answers you seek lie at the heart of this maze, but the path is treacherous. To find your way, you must learn to see beyond what your eyes tell you, to trust in the unseen." The hermit reached into his tattered coat and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This will help guide you, but be warned, its power comes at a price." Alex hesitated before taking the box. As soon as his fingers touched the wood, he felt a jolt of energy course through him. The forest around him seemed to flicker, revealing glimpses of shadowy figures moving just beyond the veil of reality. What is this?" Alex gasped, nearly dropping the box in shock. The old man's eyes glittered in the pulsing blue light. "A key and a cage, a beacon and a warning. Use it wisely, for each time you open it, you'll draw the attention of things best left undisturbed." Before Alex could ask for clarification, the hermit began to fade into the shadows. "Wait," Alex called out. "I still have so many questions." The old man's voice echoed around the clearing as his form dissolved into mist. "Seek the circle of the dead, where earth and sky bleed into one. There, you'll find the truth you seek, for better or for worse." And then he was gone, leaving Alex alone once more in the pulsing blue glow of the symbols. For a long moment, Alex stood frozen, the weight of the wooden box heavy in his hands. Part of him wanted to fling it away, to turn and run, to wake up from this nightmare. But a deeper part, a part he was only just beginning to recognize, knew that there was no going back. With a deep breath, Alex opened the box. Inside, he found a small polished stone covered in the same strange symbols he'd seen on the trees. As he lifted it out, the stone began to glow, casting a soft golden light that seemed to cut through the forest's oppressive atmosphere. Suddenly, the symbols on the trees flared brightly, and Alex heard a chorus of whispers all around him. Seeker, Lost One, Chosen. The voices grew louder, more insistent, until Alex could barely think. He clutched the stone tightly, and to his amazement, the cacophony subsided. Looking down at the map, Alex saw that new paths had appeared, drawn in lines of shimmering gold. One path in particular seemed to pulse with energy, leading deeper into the heart of the forest. "Okay," Alex muttered to himself, stuffing the map into his pocket and gripping the glowing stone tightly. Find the circle of the dead, earth and sky bleeding into one. No pressure. As he took his first step onto the golden path, the forest around him seemed to shift and change. Trees moved, shadows deepened, and in the distance Alex could have sworn he heard the sound of waves lapping at a shore. The deeper he went, the more Alex felt like he was walking through a dream. Time seemed to lose all meaning. He passed clearings where the laws of physics seemed to break down, gravity shifting and changing without warning. More than once he glimpsed shadowy figures darting between the trees, always just out of clear sight. Finally, after what could have been hours or days, Alex emerged into a vast clearing. In the center stood a perfect circle of trees, their bark blackened and lifeless. The ground within the circle was bare earth, and overhead the sky seemed to swirl and blend with the treetops in a dizzying display. The circle of the dead. Alex breathed, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approached the edge of the circle, the stone in his hand began to pulse urgently. Alex knew with a certainty that came from somewhere beyond rational thought that the answers he sought lay at the center of this unnatural formation. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped into the circle. The moment his foot touched the bare earth, the world around him exploded into chaos. Visions flashed before his eyes, glimpses of past, present, and possible futures all blending together. In the center of the maelstrom, something caught Alex's eye. Half buried in the earth was an object, its surface glinting with an otherworldly light. As Alex fell to his knees and began to dig, he realized that his journey into the heart of the forest's mystery was about to take a turn he could never have anticipated. Whatever lay buried here, he knew it would change everything. Not just for him, but potentially for the entire world. With trembling hands, Alex unearthed the object, his eyes widening as he realized what he'd found. But that, as they say, is a story for another chapter. Alex's hands trembled as he brushed away the last of the dirt, revealing the object buried at the center of the dead circle. It was a small metallic sphere, no larger than a softball, covered in intricate engravings that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. Despite being buried, the sphere gleamed as if newly polished, reflecting the swirling sky above. "What are you?" Alex whispered, reaching out to touch the mysterious object. The moment his fingers made contact, a jolt of energy surged through him. The world around him vanished in a blinding flash of light, replaced by a whirlwind of images and sounds. Alex found himself floating in a void, surrounded by ghostly projections of people. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Their faces were etched with terror and desperation. With a start, he realized these must be the lost souls of the forest. A woman's voice cut through the cacophony, her words laced with panic. "Please, someone help us. We've been trapped here for so long." An elderly man's voice joined in. "The forest, it's alive. It's feeding off our fear, our confusion. Don't trust what you see. More voices chimed in, a chorus of the damned. The technology lured us in. We thought we were so smart, so prepared. It's all a lie, a trap. Alex spun around, trying to take it all in. How can I help you? He called out. What do I need to do? A familiar face pushed to the forefront, the woman with the red backpack he'd seen earlier. Her form flickered like a faulty hologram as she spoke. The device you found, it's a key. It can free us, but it can also doom us all if used wrongly. You must... Her words were cut off as a bone-chilling roar echoed through the void. The ghostly figures began to dissipate, their faces contorting in renewed terror. It's coming, someone screamed. The forest spirit, run. In an instant, Alex was violently thrown back into his body. He found himself on his knees in the circle of dead trees, the metallic sphere clutched tightly to his chest. His breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to process what he'd just experienced. Okay, Matthews, he muttered to himself, struggling to his feet. You wanted answers. Be careful what you wish for. As if triggered by his words, the sphere in his hands began to hum and vibrate. Symbols on its surface glowed with an inner light, and suddenly, a holographic display sprang to life above it. Alex watched in awe as the projection showed scenes from different time periods. Early Native American tribes performing rituals in the forest, European explorers getting hopelessly lost, and more recent images of hikers and campers vanishing without a trace. It's a record, Alex realized aloud. A history of everything that's happened here. As the images flickered by, Alex began to understand. The forest had always been a place of power, a nexus point where the veil between worlds was thin. But something had changed in recent years. The influx of technology, GPS devices, smartphones, wireless signals, had amplified the forest's natural energy, awakening an ancient and malevolent force. The final image showed a swirling, shadowy mass with glowing red eyes, the forest spirit in its true form. Alex felt a wave of dread wash over him as he gazed at the creature. A gravelly voice behind him made him jump. Now you see the truth, boy. The question is, what will you do with it? Alex spun around to find the old hermit standing at the edge of the circle, his eyes fixed on the sphere. You knew about this all along, didn't you? Alex accused. Why didn't you tell me? The hermit's expression was grim. Some truths must be discovered, not told. Would you have believed me if I'd said an ancient forest spirit was feeding off lost souls and corrupted technology? Alex had to admit the old man had a point. He looked down at the sphere, then back at the hermit. So what now? How do I stop this thing? How do I free all those people? The hermit stepped into the circle, his form seeming to flicker and distort as he did. The sphere is both lock and key. It can seal the forest spirit away, cutting off its connection to this world. But it can also be used to tear down the barriers completely, allowing the spirit to extend its influence beyond this forest. And let me guess, Alex said, a sinking feeling in his gut. Using it either way comes with a price. The old man nodded solemnly. To seal the spirit away would require a sacrifice, a soul to take its place as guardian of this realm. To destroy the barriers. He trailed off, his eyes growing distant. That would unleash chaos beyond imagining. Alex's mind raced. There has to be another way. What if we could communicate with the spirit, reason with it somehow? The hermit's laugh was hollow and mirthless. Reason with a force of nature? You might as well try to negotiate with a hurricane, boy. Before Alex could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The dead trees surrounding them creaked and groaned, their branches reaching inward like grasping fingers. It knows, the hermit said, fear evident in his voice for the first time. The spirit knows you found the sphere. You must decide quickly, boy. Seal it away or destroy the barriers. There's no middle ground. Alex looked down at the sphere, then at the encroaching trees, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. I can't, he stammered. How am I supposed to make this choice? The hermit's form began to fade, his voice growing distant. The choice was always yours, Alex Matthews. It's why the forest called to you. Now face your destiny, whatever you decide. As the old man vanished entirely, Alex found himself alone in the rapidly shrinking circle. The sphere pulsed in his hands, awaiting his decision. In the distance, he could hear an otherworldly howl growing closer. Time was running out. The fate of countless lost souls, and perhaps the world itself, rested in Alex's hands. As the trees closed in and shadows deepened around him, he knew he had to act. With a deep breath, Alex raised the sphere above his head, its light cutting through the encroaching darkness. Whatever came next would change everything, and there would be no going back. Alex's heart pounded as he held the sphere aloft, its pulsing light barely holding back the encroaching darkness. The howl of the forest spirit grew louder, sending shivers down his spine. With time running out, Alex made his decision. I won't sacrifice anyone else, he declared to the void. And I won't unleash chaos on the world. There has to be another way. As if responding to his resolve, the sphere began to vibrate intensely. Suddenly, a beam of brilliant light shot from it, piercing the canopy above. The oppressive atmosphere of the forest seemed to lift, if only slightly. A familiar voice echoed around him. You've chosen a third path, Alex Matthews, a dangerous one. Alex spun around to see the old hermit materializing once more, his form more substantial than before. What's happening? Alex asked, his voice strained. The hermit's eyes gleamed with a mixture of fear and admiration. You're forcing a confrontation, neither sealing nor releasing, but facing the spirit directly. It's unprecedented. Before Alex could respond, the ground beneath his feet began to ripple like water. The trees surrounding the clearing bent and twisted unnaturally, their branches weaving together to form a dome overhead. Within moments, Alex found himself in a makeshift arena, the sphere's light creating a small safe zone around him. Be warned, boy, the hermit said urgently. The veil between worlds is paper thin here. What you see may not be real, but it can still harm you. Trust your instincts, not your eyes. With those cryptic words, the old man faded away once more, leaving Alex alone to face whatever was coming. A deep, resonant voice filled the arena, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Who dares to challenge me in my own domain? Alex swallowed hard, gripping the sphere tightly. I'm Alex Matthews, and I'm here to stop you from trapping and feeding on lost souls. A rumbling laugh shook the very air. Stop me, foolish mortal. I am this forest. I am the very essence of fear and confusion. You are nothing but another meal. The shadows at the edge of the light began to coalesce, forming into a massive, writhing shape. Red eyes glowed in what passed for its head, fixing Alex with a predatory stare. I've seen what you've done, Alex said, trying to keep his voice steady. I've heard the cries of those you've trapped. It ends now. The forest spirit lunged forward, its form a mass of twisted branches and shadow. Alex instinctively raised the sphere, and a barrier of light sprang up, repelling the attack. Impossible, the spirit roared. That artifact is meant to seal or release, not to fight. Alex felt a surge of confidence. Maybe it just needed someone to use it differently. The battle raged on, with Alex using the sphere to create barriers and launch attacks of pure light against the spirit's shadowy assaults. But for every blow he landed, the spirit seemed to grow stronger, feeding off the fear and desperation in the air. As Alex began to tire, the spirit pressed its advantage. You're fighting a losing battle, human. Even now, more lost souls wander into my grasp. Feel them feeding me, strengthening me. Suddenly, the air around Alex shimmered, and he found himself surrounded by ghostly figures, the trapped souls of the forest. But instead of the terror he expected to see on their faces, he saw hope. The woman with the red backpack stepped forward, her form flickering. We're with you, Alex. You showed us we can fight back. An elderly man joined her. The spirit's been lying to us. making us think we're powerless, but together we have strength. Alex felt a surge of energy as more and more spirits lent their support. He realized that the forest spirit had been keeping them isolated, feeding off their individual fears. United, they were a force to be reckoned with. "No," the forest spirit howled. "You are mine. Your fear sustains me." Alex raised the sphere high, channeling the combined will of all the lost souls. "They're not yours anymore, and neither is this forest." A blinding light erupted from the sphere, enveloping everything. Alex heard the forest spirit's agonized scream, felt the very fabric of reality trembling around him. For a moment that stretched into eternity, there was nothing but light and a deafening silence. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Alex found himself on his knees in a sun-dappled clearing. The oppressive atmosphere of the forest was gone, replaced by the natural sounds of birds and rustling leaves. The sphere in his hands had gone dark, its purpose fulfilled. As he struggled to his feet, Alex heard a commotion in the distance. Breaking through the tree line came a group of park rangers led by the gruff old ranger he'd met at the trailhead, what felt like a lifetime ago. "There he is," one of the rangers called out. "Sir, are you Alex Matthews?" Alex nodded, still dazed from the ordeal. The old ranger approached him, concern etched on his weathered face. "Son, we've been searching for you for weeks. What happened out here?" Alex looked down at the now dormant sphere, then back at the rangers. How could he possibly explain what he'd been through? "It's a long story," he said finally. "You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you." The old ranger's eyes twinkled with a knowing look. "Try me, son. This forest has been giving us trouble for years. Folks going missing, strange sightings. Something tells me you might have some answers." As the rangers led him back towards civilization, Alex felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The forest spirit was gone, the lost souls freed. But he knew this was just the beginning. There were other places where the veil was thin, other ancient forces stirring. Alex clutched the sphere tightly, knowing that his journey was far from over. The world was changing, the barriers between realities weakening. And somehow he had a feeling he'd be on the front lines of whatever came next. As they reached the ranger station, Alex turned for one last look at the forest. For a moment he thought he saw the old hermit standing among the trees, giving him an approving nod before fading away. Alex smiled to himself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't face them alone. The adventure was just beginning. The fluorescent lights of the ranger station buzzed overhead as Alex sat on a hard plastic chair, a steaming cup of coffee warming his hands. He'd been here for hours, trying to explain his ordeal to increasingly skeptical rangers and local authorities. "Let me get this straight," said Officer Mendoza, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're saying you fought some kind of forest spirit and freed a bunch of lost souls?" Alex sighed, fatigue etched on his face. "I know how it sounds, but..." "It sounds like you were hallucinating from dehydration and exhaustion," interrupted Dr. Simmons, the local physician who'd been called in to examine Alex. "It's not uncommon for lost hikers to experience vivid delusions." The gruff old ranger, who'd introduced himself as Ranger Tom, spoke up from the corner. "Now hold on a minute. I've been working these woods for nigh on 40 years, and I've seen things that can't be explained away so easily." Officer Mendoza turned to him, exasperation clear in his voice. "Not you too, Tom. We need facts, not ghost stories." As the argument continued, Alex's attention was drawn to the small TV mounted on the wall. The sound was muted, but the images made his blood run cold. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Massive solar storm causes worldwide GPS malfunction." "Hey," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. When no one paid attention, he spoke louder. "Hey, you need to see this." The room fell silent as Ranger Tom unmuted the TV. A harried-looking news anchor was speaking. "Reports coming in from all over the globe. GPS systems are giving wildly inaccurate readings, leading to chaos in transportation and shipping industries. Scientists are baffled by the scale and duration of the disruption." Dr. Simmons shook her head. That explains your GPS malfunction at least. Mystery solved. But Alex wasn't listening. His mind was racing, connecting dots. The forest spirit, the thin veil between worlds, and now this global technological disruption. It couldn't be a coincidence. It's spreading, he muttered. What was that? Officer Mendoza asked. Alex looked up, his eyes wide. The disruption, it's not just here. What happened in the forest? It was just the beginning. Ranger Tom leaned in, his voice low. What exactly are you saying, son? Before Alex could respond, the door burst open. A young ranger rushed in, out of breath. We've got problems, big problems. Dozens of hikers just showed up at various trailheads, all claiming they've been lost for weeks. But here's the weird part. None of them were reported missing. It's like they appeared out of thin air. The room erupted into chaos as officials started barking orders and grabbing gear. In the commotion, Alex felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Ranger Tom. Come with me, boy, he said quietly. I think it's time we had a real talk. Alex followed the old ranger out a back door and into a small, cluttered office. Tom closed the door behind them and pulled out an old, battered journal from a desk drawer. I've been keeping track of strange occurrences in these woods for decades, Tom said, flipping through the pages. Disappearances, time distortions, inexplicable phenomena. What you experienced out there, it fits the pattern. Alex leaned forward, hope rising in his chest. You believe me? Tom nodded gravely. I do, and I think you're right. This goes beyond our little patch of forest. The question is, what do we do about it? Alex reached into his backpack and pulled out the sphere, now dormant, but still humming with latent energy. This artifact, it helped me face the forest spirit. Maybe it can help us understand what's happening on a larger scale. As if responding to his words, the sphere began to glow faintly. Symbols appeared on its surface, shifting and changing like before. Well, I'll be damned, Tom whispered, awe in his voice. Suddenly, Alex's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, surprised to see he had service. There were dozens of missed calls and messages, all from the same number. His parents. With a pang of guilt, Alex realized how worried they must be. He'd been gone for weeks with no contact. He dialed the number with trembling fingers. Alex? Oh my God. Alex, is that you? His mother's voice was thick with emotion. Yeah, Mom, it's me. I'm okay. I'm sorry I worried you. Where have you been? We've been out of our minds with worry. The police said... Alex cut her off gently. Mom, I can't explain everything right now, but I'm safe. I'm with the park rangers, but listen, something big is happening, something weird. Keep an eye on the news, okay? And be careful with any tech that relies on GPS. There was a pause on the other end. When his mother spoke again, her voice was calmer, almost resigned. This has to do with your father's work, doesn't it? Alex blinked in surprise. What? Dad's work? What are you talking about? Oh, honey, his mother sighed. There's so much we need to tell you. Your father, he's been researching these kinds of phenomena for years. He tried to keep you out of it, to protect you. But it seems the forest had other plans. Alex's mind reeled with this new information. He looked at the sphere in his hand, then at Ranger Tom, who was watching him with keen interest. Mom, I have to go. There's something I need to do, but I promise I'll explain everything soon. I love you. As he hung up, Alex felt a shift in the air. The sphere was glowing brighter now, its symbols aligning into a clear pattern. What's happening? Tom asked, a hint of fear in his voice. Alex stood, a new determination filling him. I think it's showing us where to go next. Whatever's causing these disruptions, whatever my dad was researching, it's all connected, and I have a feeling we're the only ones who can stop it from getting worse. Tom nodded, grabbing his jacket. Well then, son, I guess we'd better get moving. The world's not going to save itself. As they slipped out of the ranger station, Alex felt a mix of fear and excitement. The forest had been just the beginning. Now armed with the mysterious sphere and the grizzled ranger's experience, he was stepping into a much larger adventure. The veil between worlds was thinning, and Alex Matthews found himself at the center of a storm that threatened to reshape reality itself. As they drove away from the station, the sphere pulsing gently in his lap, Alex couldn't help but wonder what other wonders and terrors awaited them on the horizon. The old pickup truck rumbled down the highway, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Alex sat in the passenger seat, the sphere cradled in his lap, its soft glow casting dancing shadows across the dashboard. Ranger Tom's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "So where exactly are we headed?" Tom asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the past hour. Alex glanced down at the sphere, its symbols swirling in a hypnotic dance. "I'm not entirely sure, but it feels like we're going the right way, like it's pulling us towards something." Tom nodded, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Well, I've followed stranger leads in my time. Your old man's research facility is about 3 hours north of here. Might be a good place to start looking for answers." Alex's head snapped up. "You knew my father?" "Knew of him," Tom corrected. "Dr. Matthews had quite the reputation among those of us who keep an eye on the weird and unexplained. Brilliant man, but his theories were a bit out there, even for folks like me." As they drove, Alex's mind raced with questions. What exactly had his father been researching? How much did his mother know? And how did it all connect to what had happened in the forest? Suddenly, the sphere in Alex's lap pulsed brightly, and a wave of dizziness washed over him. The world around him seemed to blur and shift, and for a moment he found himself somewhere else entirely. He was standing in a cluttered office, walls covered in maps and strange diagrams. A man sat at a desk, his back to Alex, furiously scribbling notes. With a start, Alex recognized his father's voice. "The convergence is accelerating," Dr. Matthews muttered to himself. "The barriers are weakening faster than we anticipated. If we can't find a way to stabilize them..." The vision shifted, and Alex saw flashes of other scenes. Strange machines humming with otherworldly energy, teams of researchers poring over ancient texts, and glimpses of landscapes that couldn't possibly exist on Earth. As quickly as it began, the vision faded, and Alex found himself back in the truck, gasping for air. "You all right there, son?" Tom asked, concern etched on his face. "You went pale as a ghost for a minute there." Alex shook his head, trying to clear the lingering disorientation. I think I just saw my father. And something about a convergence, barriers weakening." Tom's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "That doesn't sound good. Your dad's research facility isn't far now. Maybe we can..." His words were cut short as the truck's engine suddenly sputtered and died. The headlights flickered out, plunging them into darkness. Tom wrestled with the steering wheel, guiding the vehicle to the side of the road. "What the hell?" Tom muttered, trying to restart the engine. Nothing happened. Alex peered out the window, his eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. They had stopped near the entrance to what looked like an old abandoned gas station, but something about it felt off. "Tom," Alex said slowly, "does that place look weird to you?" The ranger squinted through the windshield. "Well, I'll be damned. That station's been closed for decades, but it looks new." As they watched, the decrepit building seemed to flicker and shift, alternating between its abandoned state and a pristine, functioning gas station from another era. "It's happening here too," Alex breathed. "The veil between realities, it's thinning." Tom reached for the door handle. "Well, sitting here gawking won't get us any answers. Let's check it out." As they approached the flickering building, Alex felt a familiar tingle of energy. The sphere in his hands grew warm, its symbols pulsing in time with the station's shifts between realities. "Hello?" Alex called out as they neared the entrance. "Is anyone here?" A figure stepped out from behind the ghostly image of a gas pump. It was an elderly man in a worn mechanic's uniform, his form transparent and flickering like an old film. "Took you long enough to get here," the apparition said, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. "We've been waiting for you, Alex Matthews." Alex's breath caught in his throat. You know me?" The ghostly mechanic nodded. "We know of you. The chosen one. The one who can mend the rifts. Your father spoke of you often." "My father?" Alex stepped forward eagerly. "Do you know where he is? What happened to him?" The mechanic's form flickered, growing fainter. "No time. The convergence approaches. You must find the nexus points, seal the rifts before. With a sudden burst of static, the apparition vanished, along with the pristine version of the gas station. They were left standing in front of a decaying, long-abandoned building. "Well," Tom said after a moment of stunned silence, "I reckon that confirms we're on the right track." Alex nodded, his mind reeling from the encounter. But what did he mean by nexus points? And how am I supposed to seal rifts? As if in answer, the sphere in his hand suddenly projected a holographic map into the air between them. Glowing points of light pulsed at various locations across the continent. "I think," Alex said slowly, "we just got our marching orders." Tom let out a low whistle. "Looks like we've got quite the road trip ahead of us, kid." As they turned back to the truck, Alex felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The encounter at the gas station had confirmed his suspicions. Whatever was happening, it was far bigger than just the forest. And somehow, he was at the center of it all. "Hey, Tom," Alex said as they climbed back into the vehicle. "Thanks for believing me, for coming along on this, whatever it is." The old ranger smiled, a glint of adventure in his eyes. "Son, I've spent my whole life waiting for something like this. Wild horses couldn't drag me away." With a sputter and a roar, the truck's engine came back to life. As they pulled back onto the highway, the holographic map guiding their way, Alex couldn't help but feel that they were driving not just towards answers, but towards a destiny that had been waiting for him his entire life. The sphere hummed contentedly in his hands, and for the first time since his ordeal in the forest began, Alex felt a sense of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever rifts needed sealing, he was ready to face them head-on. As the miles rolled by, Alex Matthews steeled himself for the journey ahead, knowing that the fate of not just one world, but many, might rest in his hands. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky when Alex and Ranger Tom pulled into the parking lot of what appeared to be an abandoned research facility. The building loomed before them, a stark silhouette against the lightening horizon, its windows dark and uninviting. "This is it?" Alex asked, peering through the windshield at the dilapidated structure. Tom nodded, his eyes narrowed as he surveyed the area. "Yep, your father's last known location, Quantum Horizons Research Center." As they stepped out of the truck, the sphere in Alex's hands began to pulse more urgently, its glow intensifying. The air around them felt charged, as if a thunderstorm was brewing despite the clear sky. "Something's not right," Alex muttered, feeling a familiar tingling sensation crawl across his skin. Tom unholstered his sidearm, years of ranger training kicking in. "Stay behind me, kid, and keep that magic 8-ball of yours ready." They approached the main entrance cautiously. The door hung slightly ajar, rust-covered hinges creaking ominously in the morning breeze. As Alex reached out to push it open, a sudden flash of light from the sphere momentarily blinded them both. When their vision cleared, the scene before them had changed dramatically. The decrepit exterior was gone, replaced by a gleaming high-tech facade. Scientists in lab coats hurried past them, their forms slightly translucent, like ghosts caught between realities. "What in tarnation?" Tom breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Alex gripped the sphere tighter, its warmth spreading up his arm. "It's another rift like at the gas station. We're seeing echoes of the past. Or maybe another reality entirely." They stepped through the doorway, finding themselves in a bustling lobby that flickered between its abandoned present state and this vibrant active version. Holographic displays danced in the air, showing complex equations and 3D models of swirling vortexes. A familiar voice caught Alex's attention. "The convergence is accelerating. We need to stabilize the quantum field before—" Alex's heart leapt. "Dad," he called out, spotting his father among a group of scientists huddled around a central console. Dr. Matthews looked up, his eyes widening in shock as he saw Alex. "Alex? How are you here? You shouldn't be." His words were cut off as his form flickered and vanished, along with the rest of the bustling scene. They were left standing in the dusty, abandoned lobby of the present. "No," Alex cried out, reaching towards where his father had been. "Come back." Tom placed a comforting hand on Alex's shoulder. "Easy, son. Whatever we just saw, it wasn't really here. At least not in our time." Alex nodded, trying to compose himself. "You're right, but it felt so real. And my dad, he saw me. He recognized me." Before Tom could respond, a new voice echoed through the empty lobby. Well, it seems the prodigal son has finally arrived." They spun around to see a tall, slender woman emerge from the shadows. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes gleamed with an unnatural intensity behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Dr. Elena Volkov," she said by way of introduction, her accent hinting at Eastern European origins. "I was your father's research partner before he disappeared." Alex stepped forward eagerly. "You knew my father? Do you know what happened to him? Where he is now?" Dr. Volkov's lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. "Oh, I know many things, young Alex. The question is, are you prepared for the answers?" Tom's hand tightened on his weapon. "Now hold on just a minute. How do we know we can trust you? This whole situation stinks to high heaven." The scientist laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Trust? In a world where reality itself is unraveling? How charmingly naive." Her gaze fixed on the glowing sphere in Alex's hands. "But you brought the Nexus key. That's a start." "The what?" Alex asked, looking down at the artifact. "The Nexus key," Dr. Volkov repeated. "The very object your father and I spent years searching for. A tool capable of mending the rifts between realities, or tearing them wide open." She gestured for them to follow her deeper into the facility. As they walked, the building seemed to shift and change around them, sometimes appearing as a state-of-the-art lab, other times as a crumbling ruin. "Your father discovered that our reality is but one of many," Dr. Volkov explained as they walked. "Countless parallel worlds all existing simultaneously, but the barriers between these worlds are weakening, causing what we call convergence points, places where realities bleed into one another." They entered a large circular room dominated by a massive, ring-shaped machine. Energy crackled between its components, creating a swirling vortex of light at its center. "This," Dr. Volkov said with a hint of pride, "is the Quantum Gateway, your father's magnum opus, a device capable of stabilizing the rifts between worlds, or exploiting them for unimaginable power." Alex's mind reeled with the implications. Is this what happened to my dad? Did he go through? Dr. Volkov's expression darkened. In a manner of speaking, your father believed he could navigate the spaces between realities, map them out. But something went wrong. He became lost. Lost? Alex echoed, a chill running down his spine. Trapped between worlds, Dr. Volkov clarified. Neither here nor there, but with the Nexus key we might be able to bring him back and save our reality in the process. Tom, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. And why should we believe any of this sci-fi mumbo-jumbo? For all we know, you could be behind his disappearance. Dr. Volkov fixed Tom with an icy stare. Believe what you will, Ranger, but the convergence is real and it's accelerating. Soon the barriers between worlds will collapse entirely. Chaos will reign unless we act. She turned back to Alex, her eyes gleaming with intensity. Your father prepared you for this, whether you knew it or not. The knowledge is within you, waiting to be unlocked. The question is, are you ready to embrace your destiny? Alex looked down at the Nexus key, feeling its power thrumming through him. He thought of his father, lost between worlds, of the forest spirit and the trapped souls he'd freed, of the massive responsibility suddenly thrust upon him. Taking a deep breath, Alex met Dr. Volkov's gaze. I'm ready. Tell me what I need to do. As the quantum gateway hummed to life behind them, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far bigger and more dangerous than he could possibly imagine. But with the weight of worlds quite literally on his shoulders, he knew there was no turning back now. The convergence was coming, and Alex Matthews stood at the center of the storm. The quantum gateway hummed with an otherworldly energy, its swirling vortex casting strange, shifting shadows across the faces of those gathered around it. Alex stood before the massive machine, the Nexus key pulsing warmly in his hands, matching the rhythm of the gateway's energy fluctuations. Dr. Volkov's voice cut through the electric tension in the air. The convergence is reaching a critical point. We must act now if we hope to stabilize the rifts and rescue your father. Alex nodded, his mouth dry. What do I need to do? The Nexus key responds to your will, your intent, Dr. Volkov explained, her eyes gleaming with a mix of scientific curiosity and something darker. Focus on your father, on your desire to find him. The key will do the rest. Tom placed a hand on Alex's shoulder, his weathered face etched with concern. You sure about this, kid? Seems to me we're dealing with forces we barely understand. Alex met the old ranger's gaze, grateful for his steady presence. I have to try, Tom, for my dad, and for everyone affected by these rifts. I can feel it. This is what I'm meant to do. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped closer to the gateway. He closed his eyes, concentrating on the image of his father, not as he'd last seen him, but as he remembered him from childhood. Brilliant, kind, always with a glint of adventure in his eyes. The Nexus key grew hot in Alex's hands, its glow intensifying until it was painful to look at directly. The gateway's vortex began to spin faster, the air around them crackling with energy. Suddenly, Alex felt a violent tugging sensation, as if his very essence was being pulled towards the gateway. His eyes snapped open just in time to see the world around him dissolve into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. When the dizzying sensation subsided, Alex found himself elsewhere. He stood on what appeared to be a narrow path of solid light, suspended in an infinite void. All around him, he could see glimpses of other realities, some familiar, others utterly alien. Hello? Alex called out, his voice echoing strangely in the void. Dad, are you here? A figure materialized on the path ahead of him, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and familiar eyes. Dr. Jonathan Matthews looked exactly as Alex remembered him, yet somehow different, more ethereal. Alex? His father's voice was tinged with disbelief and joy. My God, you've grown. How are you here? Alex held up the Nexus key, which continued to pulse with energy. I found this. It led me to you. Dr. Matthews' eyes widened. The key. You actually found it. Alex, listen to me carefully. The convergence is accelerating, Alex finished. I know. Dr. Volkov told me. We're trying to stabilize the rifts, to bring you home. A shadow passed over his father's face. Volkov? She's still involved? Alex, you can't trust her. She doesn't want to stabilize the rifts. She wants to exploit them, to harness the power of multiple realities. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. But she said she wanted to save our world, to rescue you. Dr. Matthews shook his head sadly. Elena was always ambitious, but the power of the convergence corrupted her. She's the one who trapped me here, between realities. She thought I would help her control the rifts, but when I refused, A distant rumbling interrupted them, the path beneath their feet trembling ominously. "We don't have much time," Dr. Matthews said urgently. "The barriers between worlds are collapsing. Alex, you need to use the key to seal the rifts, not exploit them. It's the only way to prevent total chaos." Alex's mind raced, trying to process everything. "But how? I barely understand how this thing works." His father placed his hands on Alex's shoulders, his touch surprisingly solid given his ethereal appearance. "The knowledge is within you, son. I made sure of that. Trust your instincts, trust the key. And whatever you do, don't let Volkov get her hands on it." The rumbling grew louder and cracks began to appear in the light path. "Dad, come with me," Alex pleaded, reaching out to grab his father's arm. Dr. Matthews smiled sadly, already beginning to fade. "I can't, Alex. I've been here too long, but you can still save everyone else. I believe in you." With a final, reassuring nod, Dr. Matthews vanished, leaving Alex alone in the rapidly disintegrating space between realities. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but Alex forced himself to focus. He closed his eyes, concentrating on the Nexus key and the swirling chaos around him. Somehow, he knew what he had to do. Alex raised the key above his head and focused his will on sealing the rifts, on restoring balance to reality. The artifact responded, unleashing a blinding pulse of energy that radiated outward in all directions. The void around him shuddered, and Alex felt himself being pulled back, tumbling through a maelstrom of light and shadow. He crashed back into his body with a gasp, finding himself once again in the lab with the quantum gateway. Tom was at his side in an instant, steadying him. "Alex, are you all right? You disappeared for a moment there." Before Alex could respond, Dr. Volkov's voice cut through the air, sharp with anger. "What have you done? The gateway. It's shutting down." Alex turned to face her, his expression hardening as he remembered his father's warning. "I'm doing what needs to be done, Dr. Volkov. Sealing the rifts, not exploiting them." Volkov's face contorted with rage. "You fool. Do you have any idea of the power you're squandering? Give me the key now." She lunged forward, but Tom was quicker, intercepting her with a swift move. "I don't think so, lady. The kid's made his choice." As Volkov struggled against Tom's grip, the lab around them began to shift and change. The high-tech equipment flickered and faded, replaced by dust and decay. Reality was reasserting itself. Alex raised the Nexus key once more, channeling its power. "This ends now." A wave of energy pulsed outward from the key, washing over everything. Volkov let out a scream of frustration as she began to fade, like a mirage dissipating in the desert heat. "This isn't over," her voice echoed as she vanished entirely. "There are other convergence points, other realities. I'll find a way." As her final words faded, the lab settled into its true, abandoned state. The quantum gateway stood silent and inert, its power depleted. Tom let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be. You did it, kid." Alex nodded, exhaustion suddenly hitting him like a physical weight. "Yeah, but it's not over. There are other rifts out there, other points of convergence, and Volkov's still out there somewhere." The old ranger clapped him on the shoulder. "Then I guess our road trip isn't over yet, is it?" Despite his fatigue, Alex felt a smile tugging at his lips. "Guess not. You still up for an adventure, old-timer?" Tom's eyes twinkled with excitement. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, son. Or worlds, as the case may be." As they made their way out of the now truly abandoned facility, Alex cast one last look at the silent quantum gateway. He hadn't been able to save his father, but he'd taken the first step in a journey that he now realized was much bigger than he'd ever imagined. With the Nexus key in his pocket and determination in his heart, Alex Matthews stepped out into the morning sun, ready to face whatever reality or realities had in store for him next. The old pickup truck rumbled down a lonely stretch of highway, cutting through the vast expanse of the Midwest. Alex sat in the passenger seat, the Nexus key cradled in his lap, its soft glow barely visible in the early morning light. Ranger Tom's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the horizon. "So where to next, kid?" Tom asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Alex closed his eyes, focusing on the key's subtle vibrations. "I'm not sure exactly, but east. Definitely east. There's something pulling us that way." Tom nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "East it is, then. Good thing I filled up the tank at that last stop." As they drove, Alex's mind wandered back to their encounter at the research facility, to his brief reunion with his father, and to Dr. Volkov's ominous final words. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. Suddenly, the key pulsed brightly, sending a jolt of energy through Alex's body. The world around them seemed to ripple and distort, like heat waves on asphalt. "Tom, pull over!" Alex shouted, his voice tight with urgency. The Ranger barely had time to guide the truck to the shoulder before reality itself seemed to fracture. The landscape before them shimmered and split, revealing glimpses of other times, other places. "What in tarnation?" Tom exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Alex jumped out of the truck, the key glowing fiercely in his hands. "It's another convergence point. The rifts, they're getting worse." Before them, the air itself seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of temporal energy. Through the rift, they could see flashes of different eras. A pristine prairie teeming with buffalo, a dusty town from the Old West, a futuristic cityscape of gleaming metal and glass. "We need to seal it," Alex said, stepping towards the rift, "before it destabilizes this entire area." Tom grabbed his arm, holding him back. "Hold on, son. We don't know what'll happen if you go near that thing. Maybe we should call for backup or—" His words were cut short as a figure stumbled through the rift, collapsing onto the asphalt before them. It was a young woman, dressed in the tattered remains of what looked like a World War II-era nurse's uniform. "Please," she gasped, her eyes wild with fear and confusion. "Help me. The bombs, the monsters, they're coming through." Alex knelt beside her, trying to calm her. "It's okay. You're safe now. What's your name? What year are you from?" "Sarah," she managed between ragged breaths. "Sarah Collins, it's 1944. Or it was. I don't understand what's happening." Before Alex could respond, a horrific roar echoed through the rift. A massive, reptilian head emerged, followed by a long, serpentine neck. It was like nothing Alex had ever seen before, a creature out of prehistory, or perhaps some alien world. "Get back," Alex shouted, pushing Sarah towards Tom. He raised the Nexus key, focusing his will on sealing the rift. The key responded, unleashing a beam of pure energy that collided with the air crackled with power as reality itself seemed to bend and warp around them. Alex gritted his teeth, pushing more Albi's own energy into the key. "Come on," he muttered. With a sound like thunder, the rift began to collapse in on itself. The dinosaur-like creature let out one final earth-shaking roar before being pulled back through the ozone.
Yeah, sack trays of the rift vanished. Alex exhausted. Tom rushed to his side, helping him up. "You okay, kid?" the Ranger asked, concern etched on his weathered face. Alex nodded weakly. "Yeah, just drained. That took a lot out of me." They turned their attention to staring at them with a mixture of awe and fear. What just happened? Where am I?" Alex exchanged a look with Tom before addressing the displaced nurse. "Sarah, this is going to be hard to believe, but you've traveled through time. It's 2024 now." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. 2024? That's impossible. I was just in France treating wounded soldiers, and then there was this strange light. I placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know it's a lot to take in, ma'am. But you're safe now. We'll figure this out together."
Alex nodded in agreement, but his mind was already racing ahead. If rifts like this were opening up randomly, pulling people and creatures out of their proper times, the potential for chaos was unimaginable. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice filled with renewed determination. There could be more rifts opening up, more people who need our help. Sarah looked between them, confusion and fear warring on her face. But what about me? How do I get back to my time? To my life? Alex felt a pang of sympathy for the lost nurse. He knew all too well how it felt to have your world turned upside down in an instant. We'll find a way to help you, Sarah, I promise. But for now, I think you'd better come with us. Tom nodded in agreement. Safety in numbers. Plus, we could use a medic if things get hairy. As they piled back into the truck, Alex in the middle with Sarah taking the passenger seat, he couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure was about to take an even more complicated turn. So, Tom said as he started the engine, still heading east? Alex closed his eyes, focusing on the key's subtle guidance. Yeah, and I think we'd better hurry. Something tells me we're running out of time, in more ways than one. As the truck pulled back onto the highway, its 3 occupants each lost in their own thoughts. The Nexus key pulsed gently in Alex's hands. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever rifts in time and space they would need to face, Alex knew one thing for certain. The fate of not just their world, but of all realities, hung in the balance. And somehow, improbably, he was the one tasked with saving them all. As Alex stepped forward, the forest transformed before his eyes. The once familiar landscape twisted and warped, trees bending at unnatural angles, and the ground shifting beneath his feet. The air grew thick with an oppressive sense of dread, and the eerie silence was broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. He pressed on, determined to find a way out of this nightmarish realm. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, and Alex recognized the park ranger he had met at the start of his journey. But something was wrong. The ranger's eyes glowed an unnatural green, and his skin had taken on a sickly, bark-like texture. "Welcome back, Alex," the ranger said, his voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "The forest has been waiting for you." Alex stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The ranger laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Alex's spine. "I've been chosen just like you. The forest spirit has granted me power beyond my wildest dreams. Join us, Alex. Embrace your destiny." Alex shook his head, backing away from the twisted figure. "No, this isn't right. I won't be a part of this madness." As he turned to run, Alex found himself face to face with a group of hikers he had encountered earlier. But like the ranger, they too had been transformed into servants of the forest spirit. Their faces were contorted into grotesque masks, and their bodies were wrapped in vines and leaves. "You can't escape, Alex," they chanted in unison. "The forest demands your sacrifice." Alex's mind raced as he searched for a way out. He reached for his phone, hoping to find some way to call for help, but as he pulled it from his pocket, the device began to change. The screen cracked and shattered, and tendrils of twisted metal sprouted from the casing, wrapping around his hand. He screamed in pain and fear, desperately trying to free himself from the malevolent technology. But the more he struggled, the tighter the tendrils gripped, cutting into his flesh. Just as all hope seemed lost, a blinding light filled the clearing. The old hermit appeared, his staff glowing with an otherworldly power. With a wave of his hand, the hermit sent the forest spirit's minions reeling back, their forms dissolving into mist. "Quickly, Alex," the hermit called out. "We haven't much time." Alex stumbled forward, his hand still bound by the twisted remnants of his phone. The hermit grasped the tendrils and with a burst of energy shattered them, freeing Alex from their grasp. "I don't understand," Alex gasped, cradling his wounded hand. "Who are you?" The hermit smiled sadly. "I was once like you, a traveler caught in the forest's web. But I was chosen by the ancient guardians to stand against the spirit's corruption. For centuries, I have been trapped here, waiting for the one who could end this curse." Alex's eyes widened as realization dawned. "You mean me? But how?" "The answers lie within you, Alex. The forest chose you for a reason. Only you have the power to banish the spirit and free the souls it has trapped. The hermit reached into his robes and withdrew an ancient scroll, pressed it into Alex's hands. Take this. It holds the knowledge you need to complete the ritual, but be warned, the forest spirit will stop at nothing to prevent you from succeeding. Alex nodded, his resolve hardening. I won't let you down. I'll end this nightmare no matter the cost. The hermit smiled, his form beginning to fade. I have faith in you, Alex. Remember, the strength you need lies within. Trust in yourself, and you will prevail. With those final words, the hermit crumbled to dust, his essence scattering on the wind. Alex stood alone, the scroll clutched tightly in his hand. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges that lay ahead. As he set off deeper into the forest, Alex could feel the eyes of the spirit upon him, watching his every move. But he would not be deterred. He had a mission, a purpose, and he would see it through to the end, no matter the darkness that sought to consume him. For in this twisted realm, only one could emerge victorious, and Alex was determined to be the last one standing. With the ancient scroll clutched tightly in his hand, Alex raced through the nightmarish landscape of the forest. The trees seemed to writhe and twist, their branches reaching out to ensnare him as he passed. The air hummed with an unseen energy, and the ground trembled beneath his feet as if the very earth itself were trying to reject his presence. But Alex pressed on, his mind focused solely on the task at hand. The hermit's words echoed in his thoughts, urging him forward. He knew that time was running out, and that the forest spirit would stop at nothing to prevent him from completing the ritual. As he ran, Alex unrolled the scroll, his eyes scanning the ancient text. The language was unfamiliar, but somehow he found he could understand its meaning. The scroll spoke of 4 sacred objects hidden throughout the forest, each imbued with a portion of the spirit's power. Only by gathering these objects and bringing them to the ancient device could Alex hope to banish the spirit and free the trapped souls. Suddenly, a gust of icy wind swept through the trees, and Alex felt a presence materialize behind him. He spun around, his heart pounding, to find himself face to face with a spectral figure. It was the ghostly form of a young woman, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. "Please," she whispered, her voice echoing as if from a great distance. "You must hurry. The spirit grows stronger with each passing moment. It feeds on our pain, our despair. Only you can end this." Alex reached out to the ghostly woman, his hand passing through her ethereal form. "I'll save you," he promised. "I'll save all of you, but I need your help. Do you know where I can find the sacred objects?" The woman's face contorted in pain, and she shook her head. "The spirit's influence is too strong. It clouds my memories, twists my thoughts, but there are others trapped like me. They may know more. Find them, Alex. Free them from this torment." With a final, anguished cry, the woman vanished, her form dissipating into the murky air. Alex stood alone once more, his resolve hardened by the encounter. He knew that he would have to face many more challenges before this nightmare was over, but he would not rest until he had freed every last soul from the forest's grasp. As he journeyed deeper into the woods, Alex encountered other ghostly figures, each more tormented than the last. Some were hikers, like himself, who had fallen prey to the spirit's malevolent influence. Others were the remnants of long-forgotten explorers and adventurers, their spirits trapped in the forest for untold centuries. From each encounter, Alex gleaned new information about the sacred objects and their locations. A weathered compass, hidden in the heart of a decrepit cabin. A glowing crystal embedded in the trunk of an ancient tree. A tarnished locket, submerged beneath the inky waters of a cursed lake. And finally, a carved wooden totem, guarded by the twisted creatures that served as the spirit's minions. As Alex battled through the forest, he could feel the spirit's influence growing stronger. The very air seemed to thicken with malice, and the ground trembled with an unseen fury. But he would not be deterred. With each sacred object he collected, Alex felt a surge of power flowing through him, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But the final obstacle proved to be the most daunting of all. As Alex approached the clearing where the ancient device lay hidden, he found his path blocked by a horde of nightmarish creatures, their bodies twisted and deformed by the spirit's corrupting touch. "You dare to defy me?" A voice boomed, echoing through the trees. It was the voice of the forest spirit, filled with rage and hatred. "You are nothing, mortal, a mere speck in the face of my power. Submit, and I may yet grant you a merciful end." Alex stood tall, the sacred objects pulsing with energy in his hands. "I will never submit," he declared, his voice ringing with defiance. "I have seen the suffering you have caused, the lives you have destroyed. It ends now." The spirit let out a roar of fury, and the creatures surged forward, their claws and fangs bared. But Alex was ready. With a burst of blinding light, he unleashed the power of the sacred objects, sending the creatures reeling back in pain and confusion. Through the chaos, Alex could see the ancient device pulsing with an otherworldly energy. He knew that this was his chance, his one opportunity to end the spirit's reign of terror. With a final, desperate surge of strength, he fought his way through the horde, his eyes locked on his goal. But as he reached out to touch the device, Alex felt a searing pain shoot through his body. He looked down to see tendrils of dark energy writhing around him, sapping his strength and clouding his vision. The spirit's final, desperate attempt to stop him. Through gritted teeth, Alex pushed forward, his hand inching closer to the device. He could feel his life force draining away, but he would not falter, not now, when he was so close to victory. With a final agonized cry, Alex's hand closed around the device, and a blinding surge of energy exploded outward, engulfing the clearing in a sea of white light. The spirit's screams of rage and despair echoed through the forest, fading into silence as the light consumed everything in its path. And then, there was only darkness. As the blinding light faded, Alex found himself standing in the center of the clearing, the ancient device pulsing with energy beneath his fingertips. The forest around him was still. The nightmarish creatures vanished as if they had never existed. But the spirit's presence still lingered, a malevolent force that threatened to engulf him at any moment. "You think you've won?" The spirit's voice hissed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You are nothing but a pawn in a game you cannot comprehend. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of worlds. What chance do you think you have against me?" Alex stood tall, his eyes blazing with determination. "I may be just one man," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at his heart. "But I carry the hopes and dreams of every soul you've ever trapped, every life you've ever destroyed. And that gives me a strength you can never understand." The spirit laughed, a sound that chilled Alex to his very core. "Foolish mortal, you cling to your ideals, your beliefs, as if they could shield you from the truth. But in the end, you are nothing more than a vessel, a means to an end. Join me, and I will grant you power beyond your wildest dreams. Defy me, and I will make your suffering legendary." For a moment, Alex felt the temptation wash over him like a dark tide. The spirit's words echoed in his mind, promising him everything he had ever wanted: power, knowledge, immortality. It would be so easy to give in, to let the darkness consume him. But then, he heard another voice, soft and gentle, cutting through the spirit's whispers like a beam of light through the shadows. It was the voice of the ghostly woman he had encountered earlier, joined by a chorus of other voices, the trapped souls of the forest. "Alex," they whispered, their voices filled with hope and longing. "You are our only chance, our salvation. Don't let the spirit's lies deceive you. You have the strength within you to end this once and for all." Alex closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of their presence washing over him. He knew they were right. He had come too far, sacrificed too much to give up now. With a deep breath, he opened his eyes, his gaze locking with the swirling darkness that was the spirit's essence. "I will never join you," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "I will fight you with every last ounce of strength I possess until my final breath. And even then, I will not rest until I have freed every soul you have ever trapped." The spirit roared with fury, the clearing shaking with the force of its rage. The ground beneath Alex's feet began to crack and splinter, and the device in his hand started to glow with an intense, searing heat. Alex gritted his teeth, fighting against the pain that threatened to overwhelm him. He could feel the device drawing on his own life force, using it to fuel the final stage of the ritual. But he would not falter, not now. With a final, desperate surge of will, Alex poured everything he had into the device, his essence merging with the ancient magic that thrummed within it. The spirit howled in agony, its form beginning to flicker and fade as the device's power grew. "No!" it screamed, its voice a twisted, distorted echo of its former self. "I will not be defeated by a mere mortal. I am eternal. I am forever." But even as it spoke, the spirit's words began to disintegrate, its form unraveling like a tapestry come undone. Alex watched in awe as the darkness that had once seemed so invincible was torn apart, shredded by the light that poured from the device in his hands. And then, with a final, earth-shattering explosion, the spirit was gone, banished to the depths of oblivion. The clearing was engulfed in a blinding, searing light, and Alex felt himself falling, his consciousness slipping away as the device's power consumed him. As he drifted into the void, Alex heard the voices of the trapped souls one last time, their words filled with gratitude and reverence. "Thank you, Alex," they whispered, their essences fading into the light. "You have given us the greatest gift of all, freedom. Rest now, and know that your sacrifice will never be forgotten." With a final peaceful sigh, Alex surrendered himself to the light, his body dissolving into pure energy as the ritual reached its climax. The clearing was silent, the forest still, as if holding its breath in anticipation. And then, as the last of the light faded away, a new sound filled the air. The distant thrum of helicopter blades, the shouts of rescue teams searching for survivors. But of Alex, there was no sign. Only a faint, shimmering outline remained where he had once stood, a ghostly echo of the man who had given everything to save the souls of the forest. In the years that followed, the story of Alex Matthews would become legend, passed down from generation to generation. Some would say he had never existed at all, that he was nothing more than a myth, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the unknown. But for those who had been there, for those who had seen the horrors of the forest firsthand, there was no doubt. Alex had been real, and his sacrifice had been the greatest of all. And though the forest would never be the same, though the scars of the spirit's reign would linger for centuries to come, there was a new sense of hope in the air. A feeling that, even in the darkest of times, there would always be those who were willing to stand against the darkness, to fight for the light. For in the end, that was the true legacy of Alex Matthews. Not the power he had wielded, or the battles he had fought, but the courage he had shown, the selflessness he had embodied. A hero, in every sense of the word. As the helicopter blades whirred overhead, the rescue team scoured the forest, searching for any sign of the missing hikers. The once twisted landscape had returned to its natural state, the malevolent energy that had pervaded the woods now nothing more than a fading memory. But for those who had been trapped, for those who had witnessed the horrors firsthand, the scars ran deep. They emerged from the forest like ghosts, their eyes haunted and their voices hushed as they spoke of the nightmares they had endured. And yet, amidst the tales of terror and despair, one name kept surfacing, whispered with a reverence that bordered on awe. Alex Matthews. The man who had sacrificed everything to save them. The hero who had stood against the darkness and emerged victorious. But as the rescue teams combed the forest, they found no trace of Alex. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the faintest echo of his presence. Weeks turned into months, and the story of the Superior National Forest incident began to fade from the public eye. The missing hikers returned to their lives, forever changed by their experiences but determined to move forward. And yet, for some, the mystery of Alex's disappearance continued to haunt them. They would gather in secret, sharing their stories and theories, desperate to unravel the truth behind the man who had saved them all. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened across the land, a group of survivors gathered at the edge of the forest, their faces lined with a mix of fear and determination. "We have to go back," one of them said, his voice trembling slightly. "We owe it to Alex to find out what happened to him, to bring him home." The others nodded in agreement, their eyes gleaming with a fierce resolve. They knew the risks, knew that the forest held secrets that were best left undisturbed, but they also knew that they could not rest until they had answers, until they had paid their debt to the man who had given everything for them. As they stepped into the forest, the air seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, as if the very essence of the woods was responding to their presence. They moved cautiously, their senses attuned to every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. And then, as they reached the heart of the forest, they saw it, a shimmering figure, translucent and ethereal, hovering just above the ground. It was Alex, his form bathed in an otherworldly light, his eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond the bounds of mortal understanding. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice echoing through the trees like a ghostly whisper. "The forest is not yet healed. The scars of the past still run deep." But the survivors would not be deterred. They stepped forward, their eyes locked on the spectral figure before them, their voices rising in a chorus of gratitude and wonder. "We had to come," one of them said, tears streaming down her face. "We had to know what happened to you, to thank you for what you did." Alex smiled, his ghostly features softening with a profound sense of peace. "I did what I had to do," he said simply, "what anyone would have done in my place. But my journey is not yet over. The forest still needs a guardian, a protector against the darkness that seeks to consume it." The survivors fell silent, their minds reeling with the implications of Alex's words. They had thought him lost forever, a martyr to the cause of their salvation. But now, they realized, he had been chosen for a higher purpose, a destiny that reached beyond the confines of the mortal world. "Will we ever see you again?" one of them asked, his voice filled with a desperate longing. Alex shook his head, his form beginning to fade into the mists of the forest. "Not in this life," he said softly. "But know that I will always be here, watching over you, guiding you from the shadows. And one day, when your own journeys come to an end, perhaps we will meet again, in a place beyond the veil of death and life." With those final words, Alex vanished, his essence merging with the very fabric of the forest itself. The survivors stood in silence, their hearts filled with a profound sense of awe and reverence. They knew that they had been witness to something extraordinary, something that defied the very laws of nature and reason, and they knew that they would carry the memory of Alex Matthews with them for the rest of their lives, a shining beacon of hope and courage in a world that so often seemed consumed by darkness. As they made their way back out of the forest, the survivors could feel a change in the air, a sense of renewal and rebirth that seemed to permeate the very earth beneath their feet. And though they knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, though they knew that the scars of the past would never truly fade, they also knew that they had been touched by something greater than themselves, something that would guide them through whatever trials lay ahead. For in the end, that was the true legacy of Alex Matthews. Not just the sacrifice he had made, but the hope he had inspired, the courage he had awakened in the hearts of all those who had known him. A legend, a guardian, a friend. The man who had stood against the darkness and emerged forever changed, forever bound to the very essence of the forest itself. As the survivors emerged from the forest, forever changed by their encounter with Alex's spirit, a sense of purpose settled over them. They knew that they could not simply return to their old lives, not after all they had witnessed and experienced. They had a duty, a calling, to carry on Alex's legacy and protect the forest from the forces that sought to destroy it. In the days that followed, The survivors began to notice changes within themselves. They found that they could sense things they had never been able to before, could feel the pulse of the forest in their very bones. It was as if Alex's essence had imparted a piece of itself to each of them, granting them a connection to the land that ran deeper than mere physical ties. They gathered in secret, sharing their newfound abilities and knowledge, working together to strengthen their bond with the forest. They knew that they would need all the strength they could muster, for the darkness that had once threatened to consume the land was not truly gone, but merely waiting, biding its time until it could strike again. As the weeks turned into months, the survivors began to take on the role of guardians, patrolling the forest and keeping watch for any signs of trouble. They worked tirelessly, their dedication and commitment to the land never wavering, even in the face of countless challenges and obstacles. But despite their best efforts, they knew that they were only delaying the inevitable. The darkness was growing stronger, feeding off the fear and despair that still lingered in the hearts of those who had been touched by its power. They needed a leader, a champion who could stand against the coming storm and rally the forces of light to victory. And then, on a night when the moon hung low and full in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the forest, the survivors received a sign. A shimmering figure appeared before them, its form shifting and changing like mist on the wind. It was Alex, his spirit once again manifest in the mortal world, his eyes filled with a fierce determination. "The time has come," he said, his voice echoing through the trees like a clarion call. "The darkness is gathering its strength, preparing for a final assault on the land we hold dear. But we will not falter. We will not fail. For we have a weapon that the enemy cannot hope to match. The power of unity. The strength of purpose that binds us all together." The survivors listened in rapt attention, their hearts swelling with a newfound sense of hope and courage. They knew that Alex spoke the truth, that only by standing together could they hope to prevail against the coming darkness. "But we cannot do this alone," Alex continued, his gaze sweeping over the assembled guardians. "We need a leader, a champion who can guide us through the trials ahead. And that leader, my friends, is you." The survivors gasped, their eyes widening in shock and disbelief. They had never considered themselves worthy of such a mantle, had never dreamed that they could be the ones to lead the fight against the darkness. But as they looked into Alex's eyes, they saw the faith and trust that shone there, the unwavering belief in their strength and courage. And slowly, one by one, they began to nod, their hearts filling with a sense of purpose and determination that they had never known before. "We will not let you down," one of them said, stepping forward to clasp Alex's ghostly hand in their own. "We will fight with every ounce of strength we possess, until the forest is safe and the darkness is banished forever." Alex smiled, his form beginning to fade back into the mists of the other world. "I know you will," he said softly, "for you are the true guardians of this land, the ones who will carry on my legacy long after I am gone. Remember, my friends, that the power of the forest flows through you, and that together there is nothing you cannot achieve." With those final words, Alex vanished, his essence merging once again with the very fabric of the forest itself. The survivors stood in silence, their hearts filled with a profound sense of awe and responsibility. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that the darkness would not be easily defeated. But they also knew that they had the strength and courage to face whatever challenges lay ahead, that they would never give up, never surrender, until the forest was safe and the light of hope shone once again over the land. As they turned to leave the clearing, the survivors could feel a change in the air, a sense of purpose and destiny that seemed to permeate the very earth beneath their feet. And though they knew that the battle against the darkness had only just begun, they also knew that they were not alone, that they had the support and guidance of all those who had come before them, of all those who had given their lives to protect the land they held dear. For in the end, that was the true legacy of the guardians of the forest. Not just the sacrifices they had made, but the hope they had inspired, the courage they had awakened in the hearts of all those who would follow in their footsteps. A new generation of heroes, rising to meet the challenges of a world in crisis. The ones who would stand against the darkness and emerge victorious, forever bound to the very essence of the land itself. In the months that followed Alex's final appearance, the survivors turned guardians threw themselves into their new role with a passion and dedication that bordered on the obsessive. They spent long hours patrolling the forest, honing their newfound abilities, and searching for any signs of the gathering darkness. But even as they worked tirelessly to protect the land, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that the enemy they faced was more powerful and insidious than they had ever imagined. It started with small things at first, strange disturbances in the fabric of the forest that seemed to defy explanation. Trees that had stood for centuries suddenly withered and died overnight, their trunks twisted into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock the very idea of life itself. Animals that had once roamed the woods freely now fled in terror, their cries of fear and anguish echoing through the night like a ghostly chorus. And then, on a morning when the sun rose blood-red over the horizon, the Guardians received a vision that chilled them to their very core. They saw a dark figure rising from the depths of the earth, its form shrouded in shadows and malice. They saw armies of twisted creatures marching at its command, their eyes glowing with a sickly green light that seemed to drain the very life from the land around them. And they heard a voice, a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a voice that spoke of unimaginable power and destruction. "I am the end of all things," the voice said, its tone dripping with malevolence. "I am the darkness that shall consume the light, the void that shall swallow all hope and life. And you, my foolish guardians, are nothing more than insects to be crushed beneath my heel." The guardians reeled back in horror, their hearts pounding with a fear they had never known before. They knew that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered, an enemy that would stop at nothing to destroy everything they held dear. But even in the face of such overwhelming darkness, they refused to give in to despair. They gathered together, their faces set with grim determination, and began to plan their next move. "We need allies," one of them said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. "We cannot face this threat alone. We must reach out to others who have been touched by the forest's magic, who have the power to stand with us against the coming storm." The others nodded in agreement, their minds racing with possibilities. They knew that there were others out there who had experienced the same strange phenomena they had, who had been granted abilities and insights that defied explanation. Some were scientists and researchers, individuals who had dedicated their lives to studying the mysteries of the natural world. Others were artists and dreamers, those who had been inspired by the beauty and wonder of the forest to create works of unparalleled power and emotion. And still others were ordinary people, those who had simply been in the right place at the right time, who had been touched by the forest's magic in ways they could never fully understand. The Guardians knew that they would need all the help they could get, that they would have to unite these disparate individuals into a single force if they hoped to stand against the coming darkness. And so they set out into the world, their hearts filled with a sense of purpose and destiny. They traveled to the far corners of the earth, seeking out those who had been touched by the forest's power, those who had the courage and the will to stand with them in the battles to come. It was a long and difficult journey, fraught with danger and uncertainty at every turn. But the Guardians never wavered in their resolve, never lost sight of the greater purpose that drove them onwards. And slowly but surely, they began to gather their allies, to build a coalition of the willing and the brave. Scientists and mystics, artists and warriors, all united by a common cause, all determined to protect the land they held dear. As they returned to the forest, the Guardians could feel a change in the air, a sense of anticipation and dread that seemed to permeate the very earth beneath their feet. They knew that the final battle was fast approaching, that the fate of the world itself hung in the balance. But they also knew that they were not alone, that they had the strength and the courage of all those who stood with them. "Remember," one of the Guardians said, her voice ringing out clear and strong in the gathering gloom. "We are the light that shall banish the darkness, the hope that shall never die. And together, there is nothing we cannot achieve." The others nodded in agreement, their eyes shining with a fierce determination. And as they turned to face the coming storm, they knew that they were ready, that they would fight with every ounce of strength they possessed until the very end. For they were the guardians of the forest, the chosen few who had been granted the power to stand against the forces of destruction and chaos. And they would not fail, no matter the cost. As the guardians and their newfound allies gathered at the edge of the forest, the air crackled with tension and anticipation. They came from all walks of life, each bearing their own unique gifts and abilities, each united by a common purpose and a shared destiny. Among them were scientists and researchers, individuals who had dedicated their lives to unraveling the mysteries of the natural world. They brought with them cutting-edge technology and advanced theories, tools that they hoped would help them to understand and combat the dark forces that threatened the land. There were artists and dreamers, those who had been touched by the beauty and wonder of the forest, who had used their creative gifts to capture its essence in works of breathtaking power and emotion. They brought with them their paintings and their poems, their music and their stories, each a testament to the enduring spirit of the land. And there were warriors and adventurers, those who had faced danger and adversity in countless forms, who had honed their skills and their courage in the face of overwhelming odds. They brought with them their weapons and their armor, their strength and their bravery, each ready to lay down their lives in defense of the forest and all it represented. As the guardians surveyed the assembled crowd, they couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and humility wash over them. They had always known that they were not alone in their struggle, that there were others out there who shared their deep connection to the land. But to see them all gathered together in one place, united in their determination and their resolve, was a sight that took their breath away. "Friends," one of the guardians said, stepping forward to address the crowd, "we have come together today because we know that the forest is in grave danger, that a darkness unlike any we have ever faced before threatens to consume all that we hold dear. But we also know that we are not powerless in the face of this threat, that we have the strength and the courage to stand against it, no matter the cost." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled allies, their faces set with grim determination. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that they would face challenges and obstacles at every turn, but they also knew that they had no choice but to press on, to fight with every ounce of strength they possessed until the very end. Over the next few days, the Guardians and their allies worked tirelessly to prepare for the coming battle. They pored over ancient texts and modern research papers, searching for any clues that might help them to understand the nature of their enemy and how to defeat it. They trained and sparred with one another, honing their skills and their teamwork until they moved as one, a seamless unit of power and purpose. And through it all, they shared their stories and their experiences, forging bonds of friendship and camaraderie that would carry them through the darkest of times. They laughed and cried together, celebrated their victories and mourned their losses, each drawing strength and inspiration from the others. As the final day of preparation dawned, the Guardians gathered their allies together once more, their faces etched with a solemn determination. "The time has come," one of them said, her voice ringing out clear and strong in the early morning light. "Today we march into battle, knowing that the fate of the forest and all who dwell within it rests on our shoulders. But we do not go alone, for we carry with us the hopes and dreams of all those who have come before us, all those who have fought and sacrificed to protect this land." The others nodded in agreement, their eyes shining with a fierce resolve. They knew that they were facing an enemy of unimaginable power, a darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. But they also knew that they had the strength and the courage to stand against it, to be the light that would banish the shadows and restore balance to the land. "Remember," another Guardian said, placing his hand on the hilt of his sword, "we are the chosen ones, the guardians of the forest. We have been granted a sacred trust, a duty to protect and defend this land with all that we are. And we will not fail, no matter the cost." With those words, the Guardians and their allies set out into the forest, their hearts filled with a sense of purpose and destiny. They knew that the battle ahead would be the greatest challenge they had ever faced, that they would be tested in ways they had never been before, but they also knew that they were ready, that they had the strength and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. And as they marched forward into the gathering darkness, they could feel the power of the forest flowing through them, guiding them onwards to their ultimate fate. For they were the chosen ones, the guardians of the land, and they would not rest until the forest was safe once more, until the light of hope shone again over all the world. As the guardians and their allies marched deeper into the forest, the air around them began to change, growing thick and heavy with an oppressive sense of malice. The trees seemed to twist and writhe in agony, their branches reaching out like grasping claws, their leaves withering and falling to the ground in a carpet of decay. And then, just as they reached the heart of the forest, they saw it, a towering figure of pure darkness, its form pulsing with an unholy energy that seemed to suck the very life from the air around it. Its eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and its mouth twisted into a cruel, mocking grin as it surveyed the assembled heroes. "So," it hissed, its voice dripping with contempt, "the guardians of the forest have come to face me at last. You think you have the power to defeat me, to banish the darkness and restore the light? Fools, all of you. You have no idea of the true nature of the power you face." The guardians and their allies stood firm in the face of the creature's taunts, their weapons at the ready, their faces set with grim determination. "We know enough," one of the guardians said, stepping forward to confront the entity. "We know that you are a blight upon this land, a cancer that must be excised if the forest is to survive. And we know that we have the strength and the courage to stand against you, no matter the cost." The creature laughed, a sound that chilled the blood and set the teeth on edge. "You think courage and strength will be enough to save you?" it sneered. "You have no idea of the true depths of my power, of the darkness that lurks within the very heart of this forest. I am the embodiment of all that is vile and corrupt, all that seeks to destroy and consume, and I will not rest until every last one of you lies broken at my feet." With those words, the creature raised its arms, and the forest around them erupted into chaos. The ground heaved and buckled, great fissures opening up beneath their feet, while the trees themselves came to life, their branches lashing out like whips, their trunks slamming together with the force of battering rams. The guardians and their allies fought back with everything they had, their weapons flashing in the eerie green light, their powers blazing forth in great bursts of energy. The scientists unleashed their cutting-edge technology, while the artists wove spells of breathtaking beauty and power. The warriors charged forward, their swords and spears slicing through the twisted foliage, while the adventurers leapt and dodged with impossible grace and agility. But even as they fought, they could feel the creature's power growing, could sense the darkness closing in around them like a great suffocating shroud. And they knew that they were running out of time, that they had to find a way to strike at the heart of the creature's power before it was too late. "We need to disrupt its connection to the forest," one of the guardians shouted over the din of battle. "It's drawing strength from the land itself, using it to fuel its dark magic. If we can sever that connection, we might stand a chance." The others nodded in agreement, their minds racing as they sought for a way to accomplish this seemingly impossible task. And then, one of the scientists stepped forward, her face alight with sudden inspiration. "The device that Alex used to banish the spirit," she exclaimed. "If we can find it and activate it again, it might be enough to disrupt the creature's hold on the forest, to cut it off from its source of power." The guardians exchanged glances, hope and determination flaring in their eyes. They knew that it was a long shot, that the device might well have been lost or destroyed in the chaos of the battle. But they also knew that it was their only chance, that they had to try. "Go!" one of the guardians shouted, gesturing towards the heart of the forest. "We'll hold the creature off as long as we can. Find the device and activate it, no matter what it takes." With those words, a small group of heroes broke away from the main battle, racing towards the spot where Alex had made his final stand all those months ago. They dodged and weaved through the twisted foliage, their hearts pounding in their chests, their breath coming in ragged gasps. And there, in the center of a small clearing, they found it, the ancient device, glowing with a faint, pulsing light. They exchanged glances, their faces tight with tension and anticipation. "This is it," one of them said, reaching out to take the device in hand. "The fate of the forest of the whole world rests on this moment. May the gods be with us all." With those words, they activated the device, and a great wave of energy surged outwards, washing over the forest like a cleansing tide. The creature screamed in agony, its form flickering and wavering as its connection to the land was severed, its power draining away like water through a sieve. The Guardians and their allies pressed their advantage, pouring all their strength and all their courage into one final, devastating assault. And with a great, shuddering cry, the creature collapsed, its form dissolving into a cloud of noxious black smoke that slowly dissipated on the wind. For a long moment, there was silence, broken only by the sound of ragged breathing and the distant rustling of leaves. And then, one by one, the heroes began to cheer, their voices rising in a great joyous chorus that echoed through the forest like a hymn of triumph. They had done it. Against all odds, against all hope, they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The forest was safe, the balance restored, the light of hope shining bright once more. But even as they celebrated, the Guardians knew that their work was far from over. For they had seen the true nature of the darkness that threatened their world, had glimpsed the depths of the abyss that yawned beneath their feet, and they knew that they would have to be vigilant, that they would have to stand watch over the forest and all the lands beyond, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. For they were the Guardians, the chosen ones, the defenders of the light, and they would not rest until all the world was safe, until the darkness was banished forever, and the dawn of a new age could begin. In the aftermath of the great battle, the Guardians and their allies worked tirelessly to heal the wounds of the forest, to restore the land to its former glory. They used their powers and their skills to coax new growth from the scorched earth, to breathe life back into the withered trees and plants. But even as they labored, they couldn't shake the feeling that their victory had come at a great cost, that the darkness they had faced had left scars that might never fully heal. And then, just as they were beginning to hope that the worst was behind them, they received a message that chilled them to their very core. It came from a group of explorers who had been mapping the far reaches of the forest, charting the strange and wondrous creatures that dwelt in its hidden depths. "Guardians," the message read, "we have seen something that defies all explanation, something that threatens the very fabric of our world. In a cavern deep beneath the earth we have found a portal, a gateway to another realm. And through that portal, we have glimpsed horrors beyond imagining, armies of twisted creatures marching under the banner of an all-consuming darkness." The Guardians exchanged glances of shock and dismay, their hearts sinking with the realization that their battle had been only the beginning, that the true threat to their world was still to come. "We have to investigate," one of them said, her voice tight with tension. "We have to find out where this portal leads, and what manner of creatures are threatening to come through." The others nodded in agreement, and they set out at once, following the explorer's map to the hidden cavern deep beneath the earth. As they descended into the darkness, they could feel a sense of dread growing in their hearts, a feeling that they were walking into the very jaws of hell. And then, as they rounded a final corner, they saw it. A shimmering, pulsing portal, its surface swirling with an otherworldly energy that set their teeth on edge. And through that portal, they could see a realm of endless night, a place where the very air seemed to throb with malice and hate. "What is this place?" one of the Guardians whispered, his voice trembling with fear. "It is the realm of the Obsidian Queen," a voice answered, and they turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, an old man with a long white beard and eyes that glittered with ancient wisdom. "A place of darkness and despair, where the very soul of evil dwells." "Who are you?" one of the Guardians demanded, raising her weapon in a defensive stance. "I am Eldrin," the old man replied, bowing his head in greeting. "A scholar of the arcane, a seeker of knowledge both ancient and forbidden. I have studied the Obsidian Queen and her realm for many long years, and I fear that the time of her return is at hand." The Guardians listened in growing horror as Eldrin spoke of the Obsidian Queen, a being of pure darkness and malice who had once threatened to consume the entire world in her shadowy embrace. Only through the sacrifice of great heroes had she been banished to her own realm. But now, it seemed, she was gathering her strength once more, preparing to unleash her armies upon the unsuspecting lands beyond. "We have to stop her," one of the Guardians said, his voice hardening with resolve. "We have to find a way to seal this portal, to cut off her access to our world." But Eldrin shook his head sadly, his eyes filled with a deep, abiding sorrow. "I fear it may not be that simple," he said. "The Obsidian Queen is a cunning and powerful foe, and she has had countless ages to prepare for this moment. Even now, her influence is spreading, corrupting the hearts and minds of those who would stand against her." The Guardians exchanged glances of dismay, the true scope of the challenge they faced beginning to dawn on them. But they knew that they could not falter, that they had to find a way to stop the Obsidian Queen no matter the cost. "We will not let her win," one of them said, stepping forward to place a hand on Eldrin's shoulder. "We will fight with every ounce of strength we possess, and we will not rest until the Obsidian Queen is banished once more, and the light of hope shines again across all the world." Eldrin nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "I believe in you, Guardians," he said. "I believe in the strength of your hearts and the courage of your spirits. But know this, the road ahead will be long and hard, and the darkness will test you in ways you cannot begin to imagine." "Let it come," one of the Guardians said, raising her fist in a gesture of defiance. "We will face whatever challenges lie ahead, and we will emerge victorious. For we are the Guardians, the chosen ones, the defenders of the light, and we will not rest until the Obsidian Queen is defeated and the balance of the world is restored." With those words, the Guardians turned to face the portal, their hearts filled with a grim determination. They knew that the battle ahead would be the greatest challenge they had ever faced, that they would be tested in ways they had never been before. But they also knew that they were ready, that they had the strength and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. And as they stepped forward into the swirling vortex of the portal, they could feel the power of their destiny calling to them, urging them onwards to their ultimate fate. For they were the Guardians, the chosen ones, the defenders of the light, and they would not rest until the darkness was banished, and the dawn of a new age could begin.